We are with Grieve of the Ethical Shellfish Company. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about what you do. Today we're going to be talking about scallops, but not your traditional scallops.
It's one of the oldest forms of fishing really known to man. If you think about it, they're references that go back to ancient Greece. Thousands of years ago when people would simply dive into the sea, swim to the seabed and come back. With the shellfish, we've updated it a little bit, but the essential purity of it is just the same. You search out one of these diamonds, in this case, the king scallop. When
most people are in a grocery store, they buy scallops, they have no concept of where they come from. So can you explain the difference between commercial scallops that most people will find and scallops that you're diving for, and kind of what the differences are both in sustainability and how they're caught and the quality of the scallops?
Scallops are dredge fished. That's how they're brought to the table, the majority of them. And this involves dropping very heavy gear, steel gear, which has a series of baskets before which there are things called dredge swords, which are long, heavy steel spikes. The gear, as it's called, is then dropped onto a seabed and it's dragged, and it will destroy everything in its place.
Yeah, it's hard not to think of how
apart from the scallops, right? And what it does is now, the science has shown this overwhelmingly. It will then completely get rid of all three-dimensional life on the seabed, which is fine for scallops. That's why scallop dredging can continue so nicely, because scallops just filter feed. So they're perfectly happy for the seabed to be wiped entirely clean of everything but the plankton, which they filter feed on. The facts are that the dredging for scallops in the inshore regions, in inshore shallow regions, is it's quite a controversial subject. So we thought, well, if we're going to fish in it, we've just got to do it in a way that acknowledges our love of the ocean.
And so you dive for scallops. What is the process of finding these scallops that you're finding in Scotland?
Dive fishing in Scotland has been going on for about 40 years. With dive fishing, you are the fishing equipment. And so
easy enough.
It's exhausting. 3 to 4 times a day, you dive for these scallops. And what we do is we go out and we use a sonar, and we look at the shape of the seabed. And we look at points where habitat changes, where there's a reef, where there's a kelp forest. We can just see that in the sonar, and then the art is to then drop the diver so that you can land on that spot you've seen on the sonar. And then you quite simply gather, you hunt and gather, right. I think the closest thing that goes on to scallop diving on land would be mushroom gathering.
So you're a sea forager.
Exactly, exactly. So it's all about learning about those seabeds.
So what is the difference between a dredge scallop and a dive scallop in terms of the quality that you're getting?
Okay, well, a dredge scallop is a mass-produced bulk product which is frequently frozen and traded around the world as an international commodity. The dive king scallop has been picked up from the seabed by a human hand, brought to the surface and dealt with in that manner. The dredged version is a mass-produced, very aggressively produced scallop. So frequently the first issue is grit. A dredged scallop will have grit in it.
Of course, it has been pushed along.
Yeah. Dredged scallop has to be processed. It has to be shucked out of that shell, frequently soaked, washed for a long time to get that grit away. A dive scallop, that doesn't happen. So you have got a fantastic luxury product that's produced as a result of dive fishing.
You can find scallops across the world, but what makes the Scottish scallops in particular that you're diving for so special?
Well, you certainly can find dive scallops all over the world, and I was really excited to see that there's some dive fishermen in Maine, which I think is really great news, that they're picking the same flowers in America to a large extent. However, I've tasted.
Excuse me.
No, I've tasted. Well, yeah, I've tasted the American dive scallop, and it's good. But there is something about the scallops and a lot of the seafood, shellfish particularly, produced in the west of Scotland, that is different. The scallop is slightly denser. The dive scallop in Scotland. It's not as sweet. It's much subtler taste. Here's what I find intoxicating about my job. I will dive for the scallops. On Monday, we will take the scallops out of the water. We'll pull this up onto the pier at 12 o'clock on Monday. At 6 p.m. that night, my head chef at the Witchery in Edinburgh, the Ondine, we'll be opening that scallop from live and serving it. So 6 hours from the North Atlantic, just overnight, before 11 o'clock, a great chef in London is receiving one of our scallops as well. So it's a really small turnaround in terms of deliveries. And that's where being a small country helps.
So we just all have to go to Scotland, is what you're saying.
I think you have to, as a rule, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for illuminating scallops for us. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor.